Renay. And if you want to see that marker, it's right down at the end of Swayze Parkway, and it was just also on WMUR TV recently.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so that was very exciting. So welcome, Renay. And she is also a founder of the Exeter Litfest and member of our board. All right, next up, Justin Corriss. Woohoo! Justin is a certified sommelier, author, and bartender living in New Hampshire. He graduated from Stetson University with a degree in history and promptly began working in the wine industry in North Carolina before returning to New Hampshire and beginning to work in restaurants. He was the front of the house manager for the now closed Raleigh Wine Bar and Eatery in Portsmouth and is currently the general manager at Vino e Vivo in Exeter. As an adopted person of color, he seeks to explore questions of identity, worldview, belonging, and place through writing. And as a lover of food and drink, he desires an exploration of all the things that make living worthwhile, especially the small moments. He began seriously pursuing novel writing in college and has self-published several fantasy novels, including the ongoing Freedom and Control series. He also writes poetry and has had one short story published, The Anna, which was his first paid work. This is very exciting. His first play, Scott, please tell me. Skosky, I always mispronounce it. A Spell of Ice and Snow will premiere at the Boston Center for the Arts in April 2025, actually next weekend. So, welcome, Justin. Please remember us in Exeter when that play goes big. Yes. Next up, Sara North. Sara is a New England native who often dreams of Paris. And she looks like she is going to Paris. While books held her heart first, Sara's training included writing and story development for both film and television scripts, and fueled her desire to create with heart. With a passion to cheer on creatives and writers across art forms and industries, Sara recognizes the power of stories to bring healing, hope, and happiness. When she's not writing books to build a dream on, her loves include 90s rom-coms, old Hollywood films, Hallmark Christmas movies, beloved sitcoms, music to match her mood, cafe hopping, baking, Sara, you and I need to hang out, eating chocolate, and celebrating all things fall. Welcome, Sara. And lastly, Michael Cameron Ward. Mike is a retired software engineer and author of Sketches of Lee. In the summer of 1957, the Ward family moved from Brooklyn, New York to Lee, New Hampshire to escape gang violence. Harold, Michael's 94-year-old father, was hospitalized in the beginning of May of 2015 with only weeks to live. On May 20th, he made a request of his son. Michael, I want you to write the stories of our existence. I want my great-grandchildren to know where they came from. As Michael sat at his father's bedside on the fourth floor at Exeter Hospital, his father recounted stories of his life that had never been told before. If not captured, they would be lost forever. On June 9th, 2015, Harold died, and Michael has been fulfilling his father's request ever since. The Sketches of Lee collection is not just a tale of a family's relocation in the summer of 1957 from Brooklyn, New York to Lee, New Hampshire. It's also a chronicle of family life as the index of integration for Lee and other New Hampshire towns. Welcome, Michael. So we're going to go through with each of our authors here, and I'll pass the mic so that you can hear everybody. What prompted you to pursue going independent publishing or self-publishing as opposed to the traditional route? I know myself personally, I went the traditional route first. It was very exciting. I had an agent and a traditional publishing house. I didn't have a lot of control. I didn't love the cover for my book that came out that way, but I didn't have any say in that. So for me, it was an opportunity to sort of like serve as my own general contractor and have control over the process creatively and also sort of, build my empire. We'll see where that gets me. But anyway, so I'd be curious to hear from all of you, and I'm going to start that in with Justin, and you can just talk about how you got into that. And I know you've kind of gone back and forth and would like to maybe try traditional, but in the interim, I think you've tried some independent options. So I'm going to start down here.
Hello, everyone. So I began, as we mentioned in the introduction,
introductions, independently publishing while I was still in college. And there were a few reasons for this. The first was, I think I understood that where I was at as a writer was not an area where I felt comfortable entering the traditional publishing sphere yet. But I still wanted to create, obviously, and I wanted a kind of structure and a rhythm and an external form of accountability. So by taking that first fantasy series, Freedom and Control series, which I still love deeply, which is I'm still releasing. I release it in segments, so like a third of a novel, third of a novel, third of a novel, and then I release the whole collection at the end of a year. It was a way for me to sort of set a rigid structure, get a routine going, have that external accountability, and familiarize myself with the ins and outs of publishing, not just independently, but traditionally. One thing I've come to understand too is even with traditional publishing, with the agents, with the houses, a lot of that marketing is on yourself. A lot of that trying to get reach and I'm going to use that wonderful word, virality, is still very heavily dependent on the author and the author's personality. So I've since used that structure as a springboard to sort of have a platform, to have a rhythm, to have a routine of writing as work, which has allowed me to explore alternative projects such as writing the play to a rhythm, to a schedule, while building a platform for an overall, I guess I'll use the word brand.
Thank you. So my name is Renay, and I would also like to mention that Lara here is an author, and she does the Piper Green Mysteries, set in Exeter, dead on deadline, set in this building, parts of it. Yeah, so.
This is a murder scene.
Yeah, crime scene.
Yeah.
So, what I wanted to do is I had a specific audience in mind, and that audience was the citizens of Exeter. So I felt that I didn't want to go through an agent, I just wanted to write the books myself to target the message to the citizens of Exeter that there was once a very rich history of African Americans here, and that it had been kind of swept away, and I was trying to bring it back. I'm not a journalist major, an English major, I am a reader. And I tried to get somebody else to write a book about this, and I couldn't get any scholarly type people to write it, so I said, well, I have read every single Nancy Drew mystery under the sun and the Hardy Boys and all the other ones. I said I could write kind of a chick flick kind of mystery that highlights this information. And so that is what I did. So I had complete control over my books and where they went. So I did it through Amazon and Create Space, and it's on Kindle. But one thing is that when I had the book ready, I needed to get it into the bookstore. So I screwed up all my courage to go into the Water Street bookstore. Very nerve-wracking, and asked if they would carry it, and they were very gracious, and it was just a relief when I walked out of the store. I'm like, whoo! And so this segues to my friend Sara here, because I went to her book launch at the Exeter Library, and I said, are you in the bookstore? And she said, no, I'm so nervous to go and ask. I said, I'll go and ask for you. So here's Sara.
I know, I'm so grateful for that. Writing and books hold my first memories. They're the first thing I remember in my life. And so I had always dreamed of being a writer, and this has shown up in different ways in my life. I had published poetry, I had been working on songwriting, and somewhere along the way, as seems to happen in life, my confidence kind of diminished in that area. And so when I went to undergrad, I didn't study writing, and I kind of went everywhere but, just because I couldn't seem to find the confidence to put my work out there again or for the first time. And so I actually ended up having a life situation with my mother's health. I realized that I needed to start dreaming again, and I kept seeing my work in film. I kept seeing it just play out like a movie, and so I ended up getting my MFA in writing for stage and screen. And that led to me going to LA for almost 5 years and just being in that world doing story development for television and film, and I loved it. But I was there during the pandemic, and at the start of it, I just turned back to my first love, which was books and writing. And I had this idea as soon as I've been here almost 4 years, about as soon as I landed back east. I had this idea that turned out to be I Love You in French, and I said, I think this is a book, but I'm just not quite sure because I've been in that television and film world, like how do I do this? And all I can say is that it just, with all the events in my life and everything happened, I just felt this unquenchable desire to write a book. I couldn't silence it. And I remember in Letters to a Young Poet, he talks about how you need to have that feeling of that you must write. And if you have that feeling, then you need to build your life according to it. And so just for months, and most of it at the Exeter Library, I ended up writing my first book, and I just had this feeling like if I didn't publish it, if I didn't find a way to get it out in the world, I might not. I just might not take that jump. And so I ended up doing the work to find an editor, find a formatter, figure out the whole process. I had no idea how to do it, only to know that some of my favorite books were self-published. And so I just had this this thing where I just knew that I needed to do it, and I believe that creating requires courage. And so it was just kind of like my leap into that world, and I'm so glad that I did, and now I can't stop writing.
Can you hold for just one second?
Yes.
So that I have this thing here, so I don't rattle on too long, so I can tell you about how I got here. Of course, there we go. So, some of you here, thank you for coming, Tom. I lost your address, so you didn't get the stuff I was supposed to send you 3 years ago. And the reason that's important is because it was the first big event after COVID. And 2 weeks before, it was the end of March, it was really warm. I was outside by my pig pen. I got bitten by a mosquito. I thought it was odd. And then I came here on the 6th of April, the last Litfest I was at. And it's first post-COVID, and I had been vaccinated because I had to go to New Orleans at the World War II Museum. I do featured stuff down there sometimes. And so now I'm here, it's April, and then 7 days later, I'm at Exeter Hospital after seizing and going into respiratory arrest with something that they'd never seen in east of the Ohio border before, so they had no tests for it, and they sent my kid for my will. I had lacrosse encephalitis. I woke up and didn't know my name. And it, shall we say, it took a while to come back, but one of the things that I didn't have, I've had to teach myself how to write again. I already had 2 books in the box, half of one done, and just being here is actually kind of a miracle, and forgive me if I rattle on too long.
Okay, I'll cut you off if you do. I'll give
Do you have the hook?
I have the hook.
Okay. But the main thing is, I just thought I'd throw that in there because I've got basically going to restart. I never intended to become an author. I was writing a collection of stories for my dad's grands and great-grands. And then this gets political. Mick Mulvaney said, Trump's first budget director, he said that Meals on Wheels wasn't meeting its objectives. And it should be cut. Well, my father almost starved to death during the Depression as an unwanted orphan. And I got pissed. And I posted this story, A Colored Man in Exeter, on my Facebook page for my 190 friends. I mean, huh? Because this was for the family. I had absolutely no idea that anyone gave a damn. And they did. And so, 6 months later, the person who found my stuff and put it on the 2 million viewer page helped me produce and deliver A Colored Man in 6 months. I had already written half the stories. I had 50 stories written. I have ADHD, a photographic memory, and when I let it rip, I let it rip. I can go 2,000 words. Well, let's see, 2 weeks ago I did 3,000 words a day for this next series I'm doing, which if you write, that's a lot. And I can go 12 hours transcribing from memory, from photographic memory. Yeah. So, I'm different. So anyway, the main thing was, I never intended to be an author, and I never intended, well, to publish. And then all of a sudden, as you said, the marketing, the control, the distribution. And I was quite happy to drive around the bookstores and give talks and stuff. And then the theater part of me, I have an undergrad in theater performing arts, which is what I did before I became a computer engineer, because actors don't eat. And so I had 32 years of that. And at the end of that career, I started off as a writer. I drive around, I do shows. I did 40 shows before COVID and I got sick. And so I took the first probably 70 or 80 stories and I built 2 books, A Colored Man and The Colored Folks Ain't Gonna Make It, about growing up on a dirt road in Lee, New Hampshire, coming from Brooklyn, New York. And in the hiatus between COVID, getting sick and learning how to write again, I developed a series called A Face-Off in Granite, because my family integrated the Oyster River School District the same day as Little Rock, Arkansas. And it was a war. It was so bad that the restaurant that my dad had down the street, the law firm across the street liked us, they liked me, and they saw what was going on in Oyster River between the 7th and 8th grade. They gave me 6 classes, testifying, cross-examination, and how to write a federal civil rights charging document, because we were going to go to war with the Oyster River School District. I was a trained litigator before I was in high school. I won my first case when I was 11 in Stratford County Superior Court for fraud against Co-Brown Academy, who admitted me without knowing I was black. And then I'm standing beside Route 4 in 90-degree heat at age 11 with my suitcase, hitchhiking home. Told the law firm what happened, and they said, "What did they do, Michael? We trained you." I said, "Well, they violated my civil rights." I said, "That's not what we can charge them with." And they took me down to the atomic level. I wrote a fraud case. And the judge looked at me, and he looked at the charging document, and he looked at the plaintiff, and he looked at the lead attorney and said, "I've got 2 Michael Wards here. Are they the same person?" "Yes, Your Honor." And he looked at the attorneys from Co-Brown and said, "This had better be good." And I cleaned the clock. I was 11 years old. So that is the general gist of A Face-Off in Granite. The Oyster River School Board was as racist as Mississippi. I finally closed them out 2 years after I graduated from high school, when I forced the school board chairman to resign. But this is a sampler, and I turned down, I wish I'd known you last fall, when I got hit by a Hollywood producer that wanted me to turn my first 2 books into a movie, and I finally figured out, after 2 months of work and going down the side roads, that I was going to spend $250,000 of my own money to get my work to the screen. So that's a cautionary tale. If a Hollywood producer calls you and you've self-published, tell them, "No, I'll get an agent."
Right, thank you. So I'd like to kind of segue here. I think independent publishing is kind of more commonly what people refer to this area of publishing as. Now it used to be self-publishing, and I think one of the things when people hear you self-publish, there's definitely sort of a negative connotation that you need to, like, that comes from the past history of people not having books edited and just anybody being able to publish a book. And so I know when I got into that world and decided to self-publish the paper green books, I was very cognizant of how can I do this so that I'm basically acting just like a publishing company, but doing this myself with quality control and having beta readers that are reading what I'm working on, and having an editor, and having a copy editor, and having a proofreader. So I was very lucky. There's an editor in Exeter, Renay, not this Renay, another Renay, and she was wonderful. She was Renay Nichols. I just had a brain cramp there. She was wonderful because she was extremely detailed. I would, have to, again, because I'm not on a traditional publishing deadline, set a certain goal. I wasn't doing 3,000 words a day, Michael. I couldn't. I probably also have ADHD, but I was like, I've got to do 1,500 to 2,000 words a day. And some days you sit down and that comes right out. Other So I would get a quick first draft to her, she would give me her initial feedback, and then I would go back through and expand the story. So one of the places that I found, so anybody in the audience here, how many people have self-published or are interested in self-publishing that are here today? Okay, so one of the, we'll go through and I'm gonna ask folks on next, like, who they turn to as resources when they're putting their books and their poems and their works together. Like I said, I had Renay locally, and then I found this wonderful site called Readsy. Anybody familiar with that? Okay, so that is where I found a cover designer, a copy editor, a proofreader. So Readsy was essentially where people that work in publishing are doing side jobs, because everybody has a side job now. So you can hire people on a contract basis, on a per job basis. And that was, so it was like, number one, so we'll go through kind of the resources you turn to in the writing, and then after that I'm going to follow up with sort of the resources that you're turning to in the actual publication, ebook versus traditional hard copy book, and what sort of options there are for that. So let's go through, I'll start with Justin in terms of your beta readers, and then editing and how you work through that process.
I had the advantage, having started doing this in college, of no one is willing to do anything for $5 as much as the starting English major. 2 credits shy of an English minor myself, so I had a lot of friends who were aspiring writers, editors, publishers, who were, while we were in the university setting, willing to take a peek at my work, and that's something that I've maintained well. There are a few other avenues. I've been fortunate enough, and you are certainly a member of our No Rules book club. Readers make some of the strictest editors. Especially if you're interested, and it's important to differentiate between proper editorial work in terms of line editing, where someone is going through sentence by sentence, grammar, punctuation, but narrative editing is as important. Does this story make sense as it's written? Is the flow of your paragraphs correct? One resource that I've found to be very good for both kinds is I'm a member of an online Facebook group called Fantasy Writers Forever. And every Wednesday, it's Promo Wednesday, so someone's like, I'm an editor looking for new clients, I'm a cover artist, here's some work I've done. And then through that network, I've gotten a friend group online of about 10 aspiring independent publishers, independent authors, myself included. And that communal environment is very nice. You have 10 eyes working on your story at the same time. They're all giving each other's notes, and not all advice is good advice, but understanding that and getting that different perspective on your story, on your sentence structure is invaluable. So never ignore, I would say, the people in your life, and then go to those sources. Go to the Facebook groups that are writers in your genre. Go to the online forums that are writers in your genre, and it's amazing the connections upon connections you're able to build once you start putting yourself out there and speaking to other people trying to do the exact same thing you're doing. Writing can be a very solitary and independent habit, but building a community is so important, not only for accountability, but for the resources that your fellow writers can provide you, and we're really not as scary as people think we are.
What's the name of the group again?
Fantasy Writers Forever.
So my story's a little different. I am not trying to be a writer. I was just trying to get out a message. It was more like a social justice project of mine. I intended to only write one book, and that was about a soldier called June Hall. And then the week of my book launch, COVID hit and shut down everything. So for the next 3 years, I said, well, I'll just write some more books. So they're all historical fiction, and they're researched. What I was trying to do is to highlight these stories and make them more mainstream. The Historical Society had done a lot of work on it, but it wasn't like a mainstream thing. So I wanted to write a small, easily digestible mystery that also got the main points across. So that's what I did. And as far as editing, my husband was my first reader. He always was my first reader. He speaks better. He speaks much better than I do. So he went through the first and got all that straightened out. And then I sent it over to my friend David Weber, who has edited many a book. And he also was interested in social justice and the Black community of Exeter. We had worked on various other projects together. So he edited my books for me, and he's very professional editor, so I felt good about that. As far as the covers, this is straight off of Create Space. All I did was take a photograph around town, like here's the IOCA sign on this one, and plug it into the standard cover, and the four covers match.
For me, I would say I was not as nervous about the self-publishing part because I had seen people do it, and some of my favorite books were self-published, and I had been following the Bookstagram community online for quite a while, so I kind of had a sense that that there are really great quality books being produced in that world. I think some of the uphill battle or the things that I had to work through for me mentally was also that I was writing romance, so not only was it like self-publishing, but just the stigma that can come with, okay, you're writing romantic comedy or you're writing romance. And I thought, you know, for television scripts that I had been working on, they were dark drama, and I was writing fantasy, and so for me that was kind of something that I really had to work through, be like, okay, am I okay with writing romance and recognizing what it is, but as as the top selling genre, and then understanding that it can be so well done. Some of my favorite movies and things were 90s rom-coms, as I mentioned. So I was like, okay, let's get back to just the story and the importance of story. So I write my books like I would a movie. I break it down like I would a movie, so with scenes and all of those things, and then I write it and take it to page. That's what's worked for me, and in the process, because I have been a part of helping other creatives with their work, whether it's scripts or anything else, it was important to me to have that quality to it, and I wouldn't, you know, I edit for other people, so it's like I have to make sure this is, you know, at a certain level, and so for me, it was, I spent months searching and finding people that I could trust, and so people that I knew their work, so it was an editor, I have a formatter, I do line editing, I have a formatter, I have a proofreader, and then now I've come to have authors who also publish that are now my dear friends who will give a read before it's done and do that. My first book, actually, only my editor had read it before I put it on the world, because I think, again, I was nervous if I got too much feedback, I wouldn't do it. And so, but since then it's expanded, and now I have more readers do it, but that was kind of the process of getting the people in place and getting that writing flowing and work, so.
So, after I decided not to be an actor, and I ended up in the computer industry, I'm in the computer industry as a technician with a BA in theater, and I'm good at some parts of it, not so good at parts of the other. And I noticed that the techs around me could not write the description of how to put an apple in a paper bag. We're talking senior tech spec. Cannot write how to do that. And so I made it a habit. Write down everything I did, step by step, this is how I did it. And when I got into research and development, that was a whole trip coming out of manufacturing. This guy pulled me aside and he said, you know, Mike, you've got a good handle on these machines, better than internal IT. And do you write? I said, well, I write a little bit. You got anything I can see? And I showed him this teardown I'd done on repairing the monitor. And that was the beginning of my functional writing, as opposed to what I did in college. Because from then on, I wrote down everything I did, and I had one of the technical writers who I co-opted by fixing their machines and software. And they turned me into a professional level technical writer without even having to go to school. And when I finally left Cisco Systems and got out of that mess, and I wrote A Colored Man, I contacted my last tech writer at Cisco Systems, and she edited for me. And to get my stories checked, I post them on the web. Now, you've got 190 friends from this area, so I'm writing stories about people and things that they know. And sometimes they would add details and ask questions. And that was really great, and that worked really, really well. But when it came to the publication side, I knew nothing about it, and the person who discovered me, he handled that. Okay. I got to the second book, and my original writer, it was really funny. Her college roommate at like Smith College, was my next door neighbor from around the corner when I was a kid, and she moved back to Lee, and so she edited the next book. Well, now they're both about 77, 78, and I didn't have an editor. My original backer, he said, look, you know how to do this. I'm really not interested in this anymore, because the stories I began to write became more difficult. They showed the hard edge, not the redemptive tone here. And so I needed some Lally columns for my house. And this fellow up in Moultonborough said, oh, I got some. So I drive up to Moultonborough, meet this guy, tell him who I am, what I'm doing. I'd like to see your stuff sometime. So my line editor now is retired governor of the Atlanta Federal Reserve. And he's doing my work for me.
That's such a random and great New Hampshire story.
I am random. I'm not great, but I'm
Oh,
still
no.
random.
Well, no, I'm random too. It's like New Hampshire's such a small state. There's like 1 degree of separation, and you never know who you're going to meet here. So, with regard to the actual publishing part, I know a lot of people are just going straight to ebook now. Other people are going into, both print and ebook. There are also these companies that you find out there that say, we'll do your whole book for you and everything for like a certain amount of money. For me, I did not find that the way to go, because I don't think there was the same quality control that you could find when you could actually speak to each person at each level of the process. But then it came time to actually publish, and because I had a book that sat here in Exeter, I was like, I need to do an actual physical book to go with this. And the Kindle, we can say what we want about Amazon, but that Kindle Direct Publishing gives a actually very decent split to authors. And you actually can make a better percentage on that than some of the other independent publishing routes that you could do to distribute your book. I also went through, oh shoot, I'm having a brain cramp. What's the other independent publisher? Ingram. Thank you, panel. I haven't had enough coffee today. So I also went through Ingram because I found that independent bookstores would not order your book directly from Kindle Direct. They would go through Ingram. So Ingram got you into different markets that you wouldn't get into. So those were the two, and it's print on demand. So for me, I order enough books to go stock Water Street Bookstore, which is very gracious about stocking books, and to take to special events, but you don't get stuck with a huge box of books that you're never going to get rid of. So we'll just go through real quick on this, and then we'll take some questions, I think, but maybe we can talk about marketing as well. We'll go through real quick in terms of the decision to go, ebook, traditional book, and what, you found success with that might be helpful to people.
So I went for both the ebook and the paperback route. I began on Amazon with the Kindle Direct Publishing. The reach is fantastic. Like Lara said, the spread is nice. Obviously, we have concerns about Amazon and the role it's playing in the creative space and the political space. I'm not going to lead too much into that, except to say that at the moment I'm looking at transferring everything to Ingram. I've put a pause on my release schedule for the time being. And I think the other one thing to consider when you're dealing with these large companies, however attractive that spread may be, and I just always have to say my piece on this, I'm very concerned about the rise of all of these independent authors being fed into the generative AI systems, which I would consider the single greatest threat, not only to independent publishing, but creative functions as a whole.
It's that.
Have to say my piece, especially when discussing Amazon in this sphere. But the reach is undeniable. As far as the marketing side, I alluded a bit of that to the beginning, so part of the reason I began independent publishing in the first place, with an eye towards a career in writing, is I am learning how to work the algorithms, I've left Twitter now, but I am actively on Instagram, and it's kind of that same consistency I've spoken about in terms of writing all the time, fitting stuff to a release schedule is a posting thing, keeping in people's eye. I do photography, I write poetry, I write novels, I do my work as wine, so it gives me a fairly consistent base, and you find out a way to weave all the other parts of your life into your ability to tell a story and to sell the stories that you're trying to sell. So at the same time, I'm like, hey, I just bought a really nice bottle of vodka. Wouldn't that be nice to drink alongside my play based on Russian mythology, right? And it also helped me write it too, but.
world, I'm just targeting this town, and all my books are set in this town. So I would appear at places in this town with piles of books. And that was, I got them off of the author page of Amazon. Does Create Space even exist anymore? But I'm getting to the point where I'm winding up my project. It's been out here for 5 or 6 years. I have donated all the profits from my books to physical manifestations that the Black community once existed in Exeter. So, like Lara mentioned, I have that partnered with the Black Heritage Trail with a town committee, and we purchased a big stone with engraving. I put a big memorial granite step in at the American Independence Museum, another one of my partners. They've just done a lot of things. We've commissioned a poem. Okay, so that's the latest thing. So if you come to the Litfest next year, we have commissioned a poem from a current young man in Boston who is a descendant of this man, James Monroe Whitfield, who you see on the board right there, the blue posters with the little inset. Okay, so his great grandson is going to write a poem in celebration of America's 250th birthday next year, and he's going to debut it here at the Litfest. So that's the kind of things that the profits from my books go to. And I think my story can only go so far, and then I'm just kind of going to be done with the project. And who knows, maybe I'll write something else, but it will be something completely else, probably just for my family.
So I started it a bit differently. I don't know if everyone's done this, but I actually started my own business, LLC, to write my books under. And so that's kind of how it was, learning the publishing process and learning the business side of things. And so that was for copyright reasons, lawsuit reasons, the whole thing. In addition to that, I think like the publishing process, I did decide to go on Amazon. I echo everything Justin has said about the concerns with AI and specifically, but also like that to me gave the most freedom. So with Amazon, I do have paperbacks that are available, but also the ebook has to exclusively be there if you do their Kindle Direct Publishing, and you get paid per page. So it's not quite the rate that you would get if someone bought your book, but it is a way for people to be involved and to read it in that way. I also have put it through Ingram so that local bookstores could purchase it, and I've had a few people do that. And actually, Water Street is the first bookstore to ever carry my books, so that's really special and for me. And then I have also started looking into audiobooks and what that would look like in the future, because that is a big part of where a lot of book writing authors are going. So that's something that I keep in mind, but for now, like those are the kind of the outlets that I've had for now.
So for me, this is kind of strange. So I told you I had to learn how to write again. I had a fully developed program where I would take my stories and weave them into 1 to an hour and a half production. And I was going around to libraries and historical societies and so forth in New Hampshire. And basically marketing my books in New Hampshire. I wasn't really looking at external. I mean, it was interesting, but I mean, hey, I sell the book for $15. It cost me $5. Okay? I'm retired. No big deal. Well, with the encephalitis, all that knowledge kind of got wiped. I have to rebuild it. So right now, excuse the expression, my marketing sucks. But it's it's not like I'm going to stop living, so I got to learn how to do this stuff all over again. But the main thing is, one of the things that I found was that for what I write, there's a message. And the message is, we're all the same. And if we're not, you just leave people alone you don't like. And I had put together actually a whole seminar just before I got sick that I was going to deliver to New Hampshire high schools to tell them about what it's like to be the only one in the school. And then they passed the divisive concepts law. And I had a year's worth of work on hold because I didn't want anybody to get fired or a school district to get sued. But I now have to start working in the marketing space. So if you're going to self-publish, and you're not going to hire A, B, C, D, E, and you're not going to just throw yourself over at someone, okay? It's a lot of work. You got to be patient. You have to listen and not sign anything. Okay? But basically, you want to drive your message. When you need help, then you reach out and listen to what other people say. But the marketing business is going to be tough for me right now because I'm back in the space where what I write, face off and granted, could be considered DEI. So this is going to be quite the battle. But the only thing I learned how to do in the state well is fight. Here I am.
All right, one more question for the panel, and then I'll open it up to some questions from the audience if folks out there have questions. Just if you could go through quickly your biggest takeaway or something that has been, if you were kind of giving suggestions to people that might be looking at independent publishing, like what's one thing that you're like, I wish I had known this when?
I think I'll circle back to a point I made earlier, which is I wish I had known just how easy it was, and there are plenty of bad actors online for sure, but when you find the community online that's interested in creating, or in real life, that's interested in creating, that wants to support, like, writers are not as scary as you think they are. Reach out, build those connections, and connections beget connections beget connections. The reason that I have a play opening in Boston is my dad had a friend who was in a script writing seminar in Newmarket. I wrote the script. One of the actors was the creative director of the New Hampshire Theater Project. He offered to produce it in Boston. Like, you don't know who you know until you start asking around. And I would never underestimate the people in your life who may know people who can help build those networks, build those connections, and help your work find a market and find a new space.
Okay, my number one thing is the website. So if you write a book for an audience, you're going to put out a website. And if you just put the website as your name from the get-go, that's so much better. Because I have 3 different website names backed up behind my website. With you have to pay for these names, you have to pay for the domain. But if you take them away, then some other part of something that you rigged up 3 years ago is going to stop. So just be very clear on your website and your Facebook and all the branding. Just pick one and stick with it. Like if your book is called, The Red Door, I would not put it as The Red Door, because then you're going to have like another website for The Blue Door and whatever. Just put it under your name or something like that and stick with that.
It's a little bit of a 2-part answer. I'd say the first part is when I started the process, I made a choice, and not that I'm perfect in any capacity, but I just made a choice that I was not going to complain about it, any of the process, because I knew that this was something I had prayed to do for a long time, and so if this was what I'm going to put out in the world, then I'm going to find a way to find gratitude throughout it. That being said, it is much harder than I expected it to be to publish, to market, to do the whole thing. So the writing part I find so much joy in. The publishing part, getting the copyrights, getting all the things together, that kind of red tape to get your book in the world and have it in some form protected as much as possible is just so much more involved than I expected to be. I work full-time, and then I also work with writers on their scripts, and then I write this as well, because it's just not something at this point in my life, even though I have dreams, that it's able to be self-sustaining without that. So just recognizing when you go into it that this is what it's going to cost, like creating should cost you something, but just understanding like, okay, this is what it's going to cost, and if I have an idea of what it could be, it's going to be infinitely more. But at the same time, just recognizing that I cannot control the outcome. I cannot control how many books are sold, how people respond to it, but I can control who I am through the process and what I'm putting out into the world. And finding peace in that part of it is what's kind of kept me moving forward.
Well, as I said, I've had to change gears. Originally I started out with Sketches of Lee, Stories of the Family. Then I ended up with Face Off and Granted in Oyster River, DEI. And I also have a collection called Perverse in Verse. It's about 250 pages of poems. And I've been told it's good stuff. The union leader rescinded their 50-year prohibition of publishing reader-submitted poetry when I sent them a eulogy for John Lewis. So I guess I have that. And they also published a poem just before I seized and went into respiratory arrest about Ukraine. But the thing is, I've got these 3 threads. And what I've just heard here, I realize I'm going to have to reform my web presence under my imprint, which is Creative Plutonium, which is the only one in the world. And I can have my 3 buckets underneath, and this is how you work. You work on the fly. You listen, you analyze, you create. That's the process. And if you focus on what you want to do, you're going to make it. But for me, this marketing is going to be tough because I used to be a used car salesman. And I'm not quite sure if that works for this. But the main thing is be patient. Be patient and be critical. But don't be so critical that you're never happy. Because you lose the joy, you lose your art.
All right. Folks in the audience, who has a question about self-publishing, independent publishing, marketing, writing? Don't everybody jump at once. All right, hold on. I'll come back and give you the microphone because I need to get some steps in today. So my watch doesn't yell at me.
Well, thank you for a fine panel, and my name is Bernie Grassroots from here on in. My question is about security, AI security. What can we do to protect the process of writing a book and, you know, putting it, we don't put it online, but we certainly are subject to being hacked and things like that. Yeah, I know you've alluded to it, but what security precautions do you think are justified at this time?
All right. Who up here would like to take that one? Anyone? Justin. Justin.
Yeah, this is a battle that's still being fought. I don't know if there's a definitive answer, and I don't mean to speak for the panel, but I just heard the mumblings that we can offer at the time. And I think to a broad perspective, theft in art is nothing new. I think what's new is the scale of it, and the rapidity with which it can occur. I have seen several traditionally published books, which as part of their copyright agreements advocate against using the material within to, I don't know the correct terminology, be fed into the AI systems. Insofar as an independent publisher or an unpublished work, I think at the moment the protections are few and far between, and for that I would say write to your representatives, write to your senators, you know, speak to the local politicians, the national politicians, and let's keep a conversation about updating our lax and outdated intellectual property laws to help create a framework from which we can properly defend against this new large-scale industrial threat to creative endeavors as a whole.
Shell answer man. All right. Anyone else out there have some questions about independent publishing? Look at these nice flowers over here.
How much should an author pay for a website? Like every year you have to renew it or keep it maintained, but what's an average? What's reasonable?
So I use Wix, which is really easy to use. It's sort of what you see is what you get. It's you know, if you don't know anything about computers or websites, you can figure it out. It's something that is easy to update. It's easy to use. I think mine is like a couple $100 a year, but I'll let everybody else sound it on that.
So I use WordPress. It comes with all different widgets, and there are also things that you can purchase, like if you want a cart, a shopping cart specifically, but I do not. I just have links, hot links to Amazon. If you publish on Amazon, you get an author page, and that's where all your stuff, you put your stuff in there, kind of. So I would have to say it's about $200 for the basic. But if you want to get really fancy, you could go like thousands and thousands. But anybody here can get it for a couple hundred. Yeah.
200, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I use Squarespace. I pay for the business feature. I bought a domain name. It is my name. I have unified marketing in that sense. And yeah, I pay about 200 a year.
Similar to that, there's a small monthly fee. It's like depending on what package you choose, but I use Bluehost actually because that's related to my email as well. So it hosts my email with my domain name. It has the name, and then it has features that you can do, which I'm working on, of getting your books on your website and having that pay cart feature without having to go through something like Etsy or another program. So that's what I'm currently using.
So this is totally embarrassing. I have a website, I have a domain name, Sketches of Lee, and now I'm going to have to go back and check because the encephalitis wiped how much it costs. The person set it up for me, right, when I first started in 17, but these are the kind of details you get when your brain gets flushed. So I got to go back and look this up.
Maybe it's free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm probably in debt with compounded interest.
Oh, no. Any other questions out there? All right.
Thank you.
My question is, have you had any feedback or advice given or any specific books that you've read that have improved your writing specifically?
All right. Who would like to go first?
Okay, so I've read screenwriting books to help with that, but there's a famous screenwriting book called How to Save the Cat. There's also a How to Save the Cat novel version that you could use, and it just helps. I found that approaching it for me personally, like a screenplay, helps me to keep it more active and to keep it hitting certain story points at different percentages. That just works for me. But in terms of other books, I wouldn't say like specifically a book, but one thing that I would look if you're doing character development is to really go into Enneagrams and that kind of study, because it helps to keep the characters true to what you experience with different people and their shadow sides and their main sides. And so that to me, and then knowing my characters kind of where they are in the Enneagram scale, then how they interact with each other, because it kind of helped me to move forward in development and story development.
If I have to credit a single book for improving how I craft a story, it would probably be The French Lieutenant Woman by John Fowles. It's a novel. It's a novel with a meta-narrator. So it begins as a regular kind of almost Victorian romance novel, but at some point, I think it's like chapter 9 or 10, the book stops and the narrator goes, "Hi, you're reading a book." And I remember distinctly they get into conversations of what it means to write and craft a story, and I'm going to butcher the quote, I'm paraphrasing, but it ends that chapter on an author is a person fixing fights, and the trick of fixing a fight is convincing the audience it isn't fixed. So even though as you're crafting and writing a story, you know how it's going to end, so much of the key is convincing other people that it can go 10 ways to Sunday. And I think that entire book, which also features multiple endings and flags you in about that, helped me sort of step back and be like, oh, here's the craft of the novel sort of flayed open in front of me. And it was a fascinating read that really took me to task and re-challenged how I write stories.
I would just add On Writing by Stephen King.
Yes, I read that one.
So that one has stayed with me as soon as you said that. I was like, no, that one.
I was going to say I have one more question, and then Water Street Bookstore is at the back with everyone's books, so you can go back, get books, get them signed, and I see Kate with one more question over here.
Have you ever been writing something and you got stuck so badly for a long period of time and you didn't know what to do and you felt like your characters were yelling at you, and how did you get out of it? Sorry.
Oh, that's amazing. I think this is going to be a good one.
Okay.
Who would like to jump in on this one? Oh, Mike.
Well, this is kind of weird because I'm an empath, and when I get stuck on something like that, and I vibrate, and I start to I just gotta shut it off. And I step away, and go do something different, like cut down a tree, change the oil in the car, bake something, get on my bicycle. In other words, when you lock, you have to unlock yourself. You have to step away, because in the back of your mind, that conflict, for me anyway, will resolve itself. But I have to get separation. So I stay on top of it. I go into what I call a spin lock, which is like drilling to China. And means then you get frustrated and you get pissed. And then, if you still try to write, the tone of what you're writing changes as well. So if you get locked, a physical, mental disconnection from what you're doing, it may be 2 or 3 days, but don't force it, let it come back to you. Don't fight it, let it come back to you.
What if it's been a lot longer than 2 or 3 days?
Okay. I stopped writing the book Titanium Rose, which is the 3rd book in Sketches of Lee, in 2021.
Okay.
Why? 2 things. One, it was COVID, and I couldn't interview my mother's friends without bringing the virus into their house and killing them. And I didn't want that in the dedication line. After I interviewed this lady, she died. So, yeah. And then, after I recovered from the encephalitis and had finished or had still rebuilding my ability to write, I couldn't fire. I could not fire. So, Titanium Rose got triggered with this screenplay offer that I received over Thanksgiving. And it triggered, January 14th I triggered, and I fired for 20 days and wrote 42,000 words after a year and a half. That's me.
I would just say that I've learned to not use writer's block as a term for what I'm working through. A lot of times I realized if I'm having trouble writing or getting the characters what they need to be doing on the page, a lot of times it's either because there's something I haven't lived through yet. There's something that I haven't processed. So that means like it's very hard. I don't think we should expect readers or audiences to go through something we're not willing to, and sometimes there's an emotional barrier in what we need to actually move through in order to get to that emotion that needs to be on the page, and we know it, but we're afraid of it. And so it comes as like this way to distance from the page. And I've also learned to listen, because 2 characters, I think if you're not a writer, that can be very strange to be like, no, they talk to me, they often yell at me, they're telling me no. Sometimes they withhold information because it's like I had in my mind where it needed to go, and that's not actually the story that needed to be told, and they're trying to get me to go a different path, and they're like, no, we're just gonna stay here until you kind of allow the story that needs to happen to flow out. So that's the best advice I could give on that.
I write historical fiction, so I research for months and months and months, and it's all written down, and I have outlines and organization, and I'm thinking about it for a long time, and then I sit down and write, and then I don't stop writing, and then it's done.
Some of the best advice I've ever received when I get stuck on a certain part is just straight skip it. Learning to write non-sequentially, so if I have a scene that I need to get done that isn't coming, I bullet point what needs to happen in it, and I write the scene that comes after, or the scene 5 chapters away. You can always come back to it, and sometimes I've found, and so my Freedom and Control series is high political fantasy, right? This conversation needs to happen, these 2 characters need to form a plot. Well, what's the fallout of that plot? Maybe let's write the war begins, and I can come back and be like, here's what's happened, how did we get here? So you build yourself almost your own roadmap writing non-sequentially, so you can come back to it later and help you get to that point.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Justin, I do the same thing. I kind of put parentheses around and I'm like, add something here, blah, 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 and then I come back to it. So, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Please go back and support the authors at the book table from Water Street Bookstore and enjoy the poetry.